Just wait for everyone to join for a few moments. All right. Welcome, folks. We'll just give everyone a few minutes to join. All right. Well, should I get started? Should we give folks a couple more minutes to join? All right, well, I think in the interest of time, we will get started shortly. On the screen right now, we have just our first slide of our presentation, but on the bottom right-hand corner, there is a QR code. If anyone needs the slides ahead of time or would like to take a look at the slides, you can scan that code on the right-hand side there, and it'll take you to slides. They are not yet translated. My apologies. We will share a fully translated version probably in the new year, along with our website launch. Okay, so folks are just joining slowly. I'm going to talk really briefly just about the accessibility features we have for this webinar. First and foremost, again, we have the QR code for the presentation on the screen. It is available currently in English. I just want to have a quick explanation of the accessibility features. So if you would like, you can select French audio. You can also select American Sign Language or Quebec Sign Language. To do that, you just need to click on the three dots on the bottom of your screen and you can select interpretation. And then there's also closed captions available. If you have any technical issues during our webinar today, please use the Q&A function rather than the chat, as we disable the chat just so it doesn't distract anybody with screen readers. So if you're having any technical issues, please mention it in the Q&A, and also anytime add your questions in the Q&A as well. Final thing, if you disconnect from our call today, please just use the same link and hopefully you'll be able to rejoin. If you need any other technical support, please mention it to Amin in the Q&A. All right, so we can get started now. Everybody, welcome to our webinar launch, Strengthening the Climate Resilience of People with Disabilities. My name is Jasmine. I am from the Social Research and Demonstration Corporation. I will describe our organizations in a few moments. I just want to first acknowledge with gratitude and respect that we'd like to begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people of all the lands that we're on. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this land home. This acknowledgement is just a small but important part in honoring and showing respect for the diverse histories and cultures of Indigenous peoples in Canada. We also acknowledge the colonial structures and the ongoing impact it has on all of our work. And on the right-hand side there's just a screenshot of a map of North America. It's from the Native Land digital website, which is a really great resource if you're looking to learn more about treaties or about the lands that you are living on. I always recommend it. One other note, we just want to acknowledge that accessibility is a learning process, and we are not aiming, we aim for perfection, but it is not always possible. So we're very open to feedback and just acknowledge that it's a learning process. Additionally, we use a person-centered approach when addressing issues related to people with disabilities, but also want to acknowledge that, you know, language is very powerful and changes, and everyone has different preferences in how they would like to be referred to. So, you know, we often use identity first language. So, you know, people with disabilities, but some communities prefer other ways. And we're going to really take the lead from the community in our work here. Okay, so after all of that, I would just like to briefly go through the agenda. We did our welcome. I'm going to talk briefly about our goals for the webinar today. I'll provide a bit of a project overview, and we're going to have our team share some of the details of the project. We'll talk about our advisory committee, and we'll also have some of our advisory committee members speak today. And if we have time, we will provide some more information about the timeline as well as how you can get involved. So the goals for the webinar today, this is our launch webinar, our official launch. We started this project in April of 2025, and we've been doing a lot of background work. But today we want to, introduce the project and its purpose, including the scope and timeline. We want to build awareness and a shared understanding, just to explain key concepts and our research framework. And this is really, our ability to begin our community engagement. We're starting to ask participants to share their lived experiences and invite broad feedback. We'll also highlight the partnerships and the key actors that are involved and share opportunities about how you can get involved and how to share information about the project. So just briefly, our partners. So I'm from SRDC, and we are a nonprofit research organization, and we were created specifically to develop, field test, and rigorously evaluate new programs. The other two partners on this project are Eviance, which is a national disability-led organization focused on disability issues, and they prioritize diverse knowledge and evidence and inform policy practice and research. And then finally, Canadian Red Cross is also a partner on this project. I imagine most of you have heard of them. And they are dedicated to helping people in communities in Canada and around the world in times of need and supporting them in strengthening their resilience. So now I'd like to turn it over to our team member, Fraulein, to discuss the project values.
Thanks, Jasmine. All right. Hi, everyone. You can just move to the next slide. Yes, my name is Fraulein. I am part of the SRDC research team, and I will be introducing our values. We ground our work in 9 core values that shape every stage of this project, from project planning to our knowledge sharing activities. I'm not going to go into the specific of each values listed here, but as a summary, our values represent a shared commitment to a community-centered research practice that upholds disability justice and human rights, advances inclusivity, and fosters reflection and growth. Our research approach will also focus on collaboration, co-creation, and community capacity building. Our research is also grounded in an awareness of the diverse and intersecting experiences of people with disabilities and recognizes people with disabilities as experts of their own climate experiences of climate-related emergencies. And these project values reflect the goals of the project along with the values that our partner and SRDC, so Eviance and the Canadian Red Cross, share. And that's our values. I'm turning it back to Jasmine just to present our project overview.
Great. Thank you, Fraulein. So now I'll just go briefly over the project values or project overview, including the background and objectives. So as I mentioned, we started in April 2025, and this is a 3-year project which is funded by Accessibility Standards Canada. And we're taking a case study approach that focuses on collaborating with local disability communities, emergency management, and federally regulated organizations. And the goal of this is to better understand the varied and intersectional capacities and needs of people with disabilities related to climate emergencies. And then also how service providers involved in emergency management, including federally regulated organizations, how can these organizations support the needs through the programs and services they provide? So overall, we're going to take this case study approach, and with our results, it will inform the development of accessibility standards in emergency management. But overall, based on the values that Fraulein just described, it's really constructed as a listening exercise and a starting point to develop conversations and connections between the community level as well as with provincial and federal actors. And just to provide a little bit on the background, why this matters really is just that people with disabilities face higher risks during climate emergencies. And this is solely, due to systemic inequalities, isolation, ableism, and limited access to critical services. People have intersectional needs as well. So, factors like race, gender, income, and geography can impact these risks. And this leads to increased mortality and exclusion. Canada also has rights-based obligations. We are signatories on international frameworks, such as the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities and the Sendai Framework. And these aim to protect people with disabilities through inclusive climate adaptation and emergency policies. So we have an obligation as, human rights-based obligation to meet the needs of people with disabilities. And so we need inclusive standards on how to do that. And that is one of the goals of this project. And now on the screen, I just have a screenshot of from Employment and Social Development Canada. It is just entitled Industries Under Federal Jurisdiction. I was not entirely sure what federally regulated organizations meant, and so this provides a bit of an overview. So on the left-hand side, you can see it's interprovincial and international transportation, so air, rail, roads, maritime, including ports. This also includes telecommunications and broadcasting, banks, postal services, feed, flour, seed, and grain. You can tell we're an agricultural country, as well as miscellaneous industries, mining, museums, and First Nations band councils and Indigenous self-governments, so certain activities there. And then on the right-hand side, you see the estimate shares of employees in these industries as well. So you can see banks are a big one there, as well as transportation, telecommunications. And so these are the primary industries that we'll be creating recommendations for. But we also recognize that for non-regulated organizations, it's possible that our recommendations might filter through. So hopefully it will impact more than just the federally regulated organizations. And now I'd just like to turn it over to Vicky to discuss our methodology.
Thank you, Jasmine. Hi, everyone. My name is Vicky Chang. I'm a research associate at SRDC, and it is my pleasure to be here today, and thank you for joining us. So over the next 3 slides, I will walk you through our research methodology. Next slide, please. Thank you. So our research questions are guided by 4 areas of inquiry that help us understand how community can better prepare for and respond to climate emergencies in inclusive ways. So first, we explore the context and how past climate-related events have impacted communities and assess the current emergency responses for inclusivity. Second, we engage people with disabilities and people with diverse backgrounds to explore the lived experiences and the diverse needs of people with disabilities regarding accessible climate emergency planning. Our questions also aim to identify existing and potential community collaboration and service capacities in addressing those intersectional needs. And lastly, we look at which standards and policies can really enhance the capacity of service providers to better support people with disabilities during climate emergencies. Next slide, please. So for us to address and answer these questions, we use a case study approach combining multiple research methods. We are conducting 3 case studies, first in Winnipeg, Manitoba, second in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, and a third community is to be determined. So for each, we start with document and literature review to understand the community context, and then conduct interviews with people with disabilities, community experts, and service providers. And this will allow us to capture diverse perspectives and how the community works together. And we will hold knowledge sharing activities to validate findings and to provide reports in bilingual and accessible formats. Next slide, please. Thanks. So our research is guided by three complementary framework. First is intersectionality, and which we have touched on earlier. This helps us understand how disability intersects with race, gender, indigeneity, and location, and together really creates distinct experiences during emergencies. Second, the second framework is the person-centered emergency preparedness framework, which known as the capability wheel. It's developed by the University of Sydney's Collaborating for Inclusion project team in Australia. It examines individual agencies across 8 areas like social connectedness, transportation, and health management. The last framework is the sociocultural activity theory. It's a system-based theory that helps us understand how people, organizations, policies, and resources interact across emergency management phases. We have drawn on Collaborating for Inclusion's application of this theory to also explore the collaborations required on this topic. And now I'll hand it over to Patrick. He will be discussing our advisory committee, which plays a crucial role in our project.
Thanks, Vicky. And I'll just be really quick, but I'm a principal research associate at SRDC, and I'm part of the team on this project. And we can switch slides now. Yes, we have a project advisory committee for the duration of this project. And the purpose is to have leadership and accountability, as well as ongoing support and guidance to the project. The advisory committee will provide input on research planning and engagement strategies and research tools. It will help with networking and consultation with stakeholder groups. But also, we really want the advisory committee to be involved in broad brainstorming sessions, discussions, and comments and feedbacks related to research findings. The structure of the advisory committee is based on balancing the need for local leadership for each case study, while also ensuring that the project communicates effectively at the provincial and federal level. And so it includes 3 key principles. Each case study will be championed and guided by local disability representatives. It will also include key local emergency management representatives, but then provide space for provincial and federal disability and emergency management. And as you can see, the current advisory committee is made up of a number of members. It includes 3 disability organizations: Independent Living Canada, local disability organizations, Independent Living Canada, Manitoba League for Person with Disability, and Inclusion Winnipeg. It also includes Brett Ability from the second case study from Nova Scotia. And then 3 local emergency management organizations: the City of Winnipeg, the Government of Manitoba, and the local Canadian Red Cross representative. And then 2 federally regulated organizations, Via Rail and Transport Canada. Back to you, Jasmine.
Great, thank you, everyone. So at this stage of the project, we'd like to share some perspectives from our partners and our advisory committee members. So I'm actually just going to stop sharing my screen and I will turn it over to Evan.
Thanks, Jasmine. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Looks like it, okay. So hi, everyone. My name is Evan Wickland. I'm a senior researcher at Eviance, which is a partner. And thanks to Jasmine and the team for this inviting us to contribute to this webinar and to this project. So first, maybe a little bit about Eviance and why we are partners in this project. So first of all, Eviance is a national OPD, which is an organization of persons with disabilities. And basically, we serve as a facilitator of knowledge in the global cross-disability field, bridging people and knowledge together at a national and local level to incite social change. So our organization's vision is to realize an inclusive, equitable, and accessible society that is sustainable for everyone. And Eviance uses intersectionality and reflexivity in our work to create solutions to advance human rights and equity-focused decision-making. And we pursue many projects on diverse issues in the disability movement. We are a partner on this exciting project, which is led by CRDC and partnered with the Red Cross. And the work that Eviance has undertaken on the intersection of climate change and disability as an organization aligns very well with this climate resilience project. And we're happy to be a part of this endeavor. So I'll just take the next few moments to speak about a few highlights which emphasize Eviance's work in this space and explain why this project is so important to us. So for instance, we have an ongoing project which runs from 2024 to 2027, and it's called the Canadian Disability Climate Network and Strategy, which is funded by the Employment and Social Development Canada and the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals Program. In short, this project aims to localize SDGs in communities, and it aims to foster disability leadership and climate change activism or advocacy, and create partnerships. Hence, this project is really aligns with what we're doing today. And a large portion of our work is also about creating knowledge resources on the topic of disability and climate change. So as far as our activities within this other project that's very much related, we're creating two networks. One which is an online network, which connects people with disabilities interested in climate change, and another a knowledge hub, which will be open to organizations where we'll share information and resources related to this topic. And as I mentioned before, creating knowledge resources. We're also, we're doing an environmental scan and a literature review. And so this collectively, all these activities really do assist and inform our perspectives on this SRDC project. So a little bit about like why climate change and disability and why it's important to us. One reason is because there seems to be competing needs between disability and climate change advocacy. So this is something sometimes referred to as eco-ableism, or it's described differently, but in our review, we use the term eco-ableism, which is like an overarching issue in this space. The concept generally refers to the ways in which climate change movement sometimes excludes the perspectives of people with disabilities, and even like positions disability as a consequence of the changing environment. So this idea of like the fear of disablement, this paradigm is a theme that is at odds with the disability rights movement, right? Which alternatively positions disability not as a problem to be fixed, but both as a social construction and an identity to be celebrated. Both in our current project and our work with CRDC, we advocate for people with disabilities being included in all public, political, and cultural societal discourse, this idea of there's nothing about us without us, right? So while it is important to communicate the possible harms of climate change, we think that we theorize that this fear of disablement in this way leads to further exclusion of people with disabilities and obscures the larger picture about how climate change and disability are interconnected. And we also found in our literature review and environmental scans, people with disabilities are often positioned as subjects of vulnerability, which is an issue, yes. So we know that people with disabilities are made precarious by climate change disproportionately than others, to others rather. But when we only think about people with disabilities in terms of vulnerability, we erase the work that's already been, the great work that's being done in disability communities, and this perpetuates this idea of eco-ableism. So it's important to emphasize the vulnerability of persons with disabilities, but we need to recognize that this is not the only story, right? So people with disabilities are also a very important part of the climate change movement, and they have knowledge and experience and expertise to contribute in this space. So we really want to prop that up with this project as well. And we do that in several ways. And these I'll be short here, but there's some recommendations and some early musings that we have from this project and our other project, which pertain directly to this overall concept of climate change and disability. So first, we recommend consistent and broad engagement with OPDs in all aspects of emergency preparedness at all levels of research, policy, and planning. And this includes making space and opportunities for people with disabilities to work in all aspects of emergency management, such as mitigation, adaptation, response, recovery, etc. We also advocate for all resources and communications to be accessible to diverse disability communities, which is not only a universal design approach, but ensuring that materials are individualized and how do we find those needs. So this includes accessible forms of warning systems, accessible shelters, and ensuring that communication systems are flexible enough to meet the diverse needs, but also utilize technologies when they're available. We also believe in multi-level and interdisciplinary collaboration, as we're doing today. Emergency management at large is a massive sector, and it's primarily shaped around a charity model of disability, which we problematize. Collaboration between large organizations, governments, and local OPDs and community organizations can lead to more effective programming and service at all levels. So engagement rather with local organizations gives credibility to programs and projects and can provide increased opportunities for intersectional and even decolonial approaches to emergency response. Okay, and there's one last thing I wanted to say. We really believe that there needs to be attention paid to redefining care and interdependence within the climate change space. So disrupting hierarchical models of how care is enacted and distributed allow us for stronger collaboration and increased relationships across different communities. Increasing who is contributing to climate strategies supports this idea of a more inclusive and accessible approach to climate change response. Okay, so those are some themes that we're working on collectively. But this idea of collaboration, interdependence, looking at involving OPDs, drawing on experience of persons with disabilities, these are all themes that have come out in these past couple of years and continue on with this project. Okay, I'll stop now, and I'll pass it back to Jasmine.
Great. Thanks so much, Evan, for introducing Eviance and the important background and related issues that we're talking about today. I would like to turn it over now to Alina and Allison from the Canadian Red Cross.
Hi everyone, my name is Alina Konevsky and I am with the Canadian Red Cross Emergency Management Program. We're honored to be a part of this initiative to better understand how people with disabilities are impacted by climate-related events. The Red Cross supports many people in Canada every year during emergency events, supporting people to meet their basic needs and strengthening their resilience to face such events. This includes supporting people with diverse and complex needs, and disability inclusion is critically important to our work and to our identity as a nonprofit society. So I'd like to introduce my colleague, Allison Everett, who is based in Winnipeg and has tremendous experience supporting people with disabilities through emergency events.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much, Alina, and thank you to everybody for having me here today. Very honored to be a part of this group. As Alina said, I'm based in Winnipeg, Manitoba, so Treaty 1 territory here, and I've lived here for about 20 years or so now, and worked with the Canadian Red Cross, specifically in delivering relief services for emergencies in Manitoba across various different communities for 11 years now. This summer, as many, if you live in Manitoba or if you were just watching the news, I would imagine in other provinces as well, you would know that this summer was a particularly challenging one for a lot of people in the province due to predominantly wildfires. And so whether that was the impacts of fire or from smoke from these events, they started very early this year for us in May. Normally we're kind of just coming out of flood season or what would be flood season and heading into the fire season because the temperatures aren't normally high enough for the wildfires to be a huge risk at that point. But like I said, this past summer was a little bit different for us. So the wildfire supports that we provided, I believe, began on May 24th, and they actually went through until the end of September. So, an exceptionally long fire season and response season for us here. And as Alina said, like we do a lot of work with a variety of different communities who are impacted in these types of events. And the people, you know, who are often feeling the impacts the most significantly are those who are particularly vulnerable for a variety of different reasons. So vulnerabilities can really be exacerbated in times of crisis, in times of emergency, as we know. And, you know, just to be clear, like vulnerabilities um, can be a large range of things that can make you more vulnerable in a given moment. It could, of course, be, you know, complex health issues, particularly if it's wildfire smoke and you have complex health issues with regards to breathing. It can also be, you know, pregnancy, it can be newborns, it can be, of course, people with disabilities, it can be people who are experiencing homelessness. So there's a variety of different factors that can make you more vulnerable in a given emergency. And we, as the Canadian Red Cross, really do try to work in the best way possible to ensure that we are meeting the needs of everybody who is coming to us for support, to make sure that, you know, we're responding to what those needs are, that they're correctly being identified, and that, you know, we're able to adjust services or provide referrals to other organizations to ensure that whatever a person might need in that moment can be provided. So I'll just speak to a couple of different pieces. So for us as the Canadian Red Cross, specifically in Manitoba, we do support with evacuation supports in addition to supports once you're in what we would call a host community, so where you've been evacuated to. So the transportation piece can be quite complex, particularly in, you know, in a wildfire that, you know, may be compromising road access or air access, or boat access to a community. And so it's really looking at how to provide those types of services in a way that is as quick and responsive as possible to ensure that we're able to get people out quickly, to make sure that those are safe options. But then, of course, ensuring that those different services also respond to a variety of needs that you might have if you do have any type of disability, whether that be a physical disability that would require you to be in a wheelchair, or that would require a walker or a cane, or any other type of mobility implement that that's needed, because there's, of course, you know, different varieties of transportation that would then be needed on the evacuation end, but also on the receiving end in the host community. As I'm sure that many people are aware, you know, transportation, particularly for wheelchairs, is, you know, not as prevalent as we would like it to be. Those types of vehicles that can support that are not as plentiful as we would like to see, and so it's really trying to have an understanding of who is coming from the community, what kind of needs might there be on the receiving end, and then ensuring that we have that available for people so that they're not having to wait for any types of supports, and so that they know that, you know, there's a lot of care and attention that is being paid to everybody, and that, you know, we're aware of what's needed, and that we're ready to provide that. Also noting that we do have some specialized teams within the organization. So we have a team of health navigators. These are folks with some health backgrounds who specifically work with the different facets of health in different communities to see how best to make connections for people, how to support them as they navigate a different health system. Specifically, when we look at people who might be coming from a northern or more remote community where health services are all in one center, and then they're coming to somewhere like the city of Winnipeg, which is much bigger. There's a lot of different types of health services. Do I go to an urgent care? Do I call 911? Do I try and find a walk-in? And so that's where those health navigator roles can be really important for us because they can help to facilitate a lot of those conversations, make those connections, and just make sure that people aren't getting stuck in a long system, a long process to get what they would need. So working directly with partners to make those connections for people. We have safety and well-being teams. These are more on our mental health and psychosocial supports that under that umbrella. And so these are teams of, fantastic volunteers and staff who are what we would say is in the field, who are, at our reception center, they're at the shelter, they're at the airport, they're at wherever our teams are. And they're there to work with people who might be having, a bit harder of a time when they are evacuating, to, have those conversations with people, sit down, get people some water, get people a snack, and just really talk through what they're feeling and what they're experiencing, again, to make those connections for people to other organizations as well, if that's needed. And then lastly, I'll just shout out our fantastic team of Indigenous peoples community support specialists. And so these are our teams that are deployed and again, work at that field level. And so they're always in the field. They're there to support our teams to ensure that we are delivering services in ways that are culturally safe, culturally respectful, culturally competent. And so they're watching to make sure that our teams are working in a really good way. But then they're also there to make those connections, of course, with community members or community leadership or whoever just wants to have those conversations and again make those linkages. And so all of this is to highlight that we do have a lot of internal capacity that we really do rely upon in these really complex and challenging evacuations or operations, but also to highlight just the huge importance for us of partnerships. So we work all year round in trying to identify different organizations that we can be partnering with so that we're making those calls as soon as we're hearing about an operation. And those other teams are coming out as well, or they're sending us a phone number for an on-call person, or they're meeting people at the airport as well as our teams. So whatever that can look like, whatever that capacity of the organization is, so important for us across the country to be making those connections, both in an operation and outside of an operation, to make sure that we're really well linked in, so that if we as the Canadian Red Cross don't do a specific type of work that's needed, we're finding the organization that does, and we're really amplifying the voices of those organizations and showing the fantastic work that they do and bringing them into the operation so that they can do what they're so good at. I think those are kind of my main points that I wanted to touch on. But again, just really like trying to emphasize that we very much see that these responses are incredibly challenging for people, and that they're only continue to become more frequent because of the climate changes that we're seeing and the frequency of the responses that we're being called to. And so, our teams are, some staff that you might see out there, but predominantly volunteers who are out there trying to, support people in a really challenging moment and make sure that people know that we're there, and that, we want to be responsive to different needs, to different requirements that people might have, to ensure that they are, safe and comfortable, and that everything that they need to be able to, live in a good way, in a safe way during the evacuation can be met. So I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, everyone, for sharing, the details of what your organizations are doing currently, and then looking forward. Now we can move on to discuss some of the next steps. But actually, just before I do that, we also had invited a representative of Via Rail. Catherine Langlois from Via Rail is their accessibility expert. And she was unable to join us, but she did share a few words that I can share now on behalf of Via Rail. And so, as you all know, Via Rail is the passenger train organization, one of the federally regulated organizations, and they are represented on our advisory committee. They just wanted to emphasize that, they work extensively to ensure that their staff receive training on accessibility and how to serve people with disabilities. And this also includes a training on how to respond in emergency situations, including evacuations. And training, I think, is something that is a key feature that we're going to return to throughout the project. And she just mentioned that as well, that within the past couple of years, Via Rail, they've had to, review their services that they offer to customers with disabilities in the event of evacuation, because these types of events that are potentially, caused or exacerbated by climate change, it's compelled them to explore new paratransit options and establish new partnerships. So they really just want to, respond to these unexpected conditions, such as extreme weather, wildfires, smoke, and they really plan to continue to work with their community partners to anticipate the needs of particular folks with disabilities in situations that arise. So I just wanted to add that note that we do have representation from the federally regulated organizations as well. And now, just in our last few minutes of speaking before the question and answer, I will just share my screen one more time to talk about next steps. And just bear with me for one moment. So for next steps of the project, as I mentioned, we started in April of this year. And I'm glad that, Allison, you mentioned the situation in Manitoba, because Winnipeg, Manitoba was selected as our first case study for the project. But we actually decided, due to the situation with the wildfires and the evacuations and just how busy everyone was going to be on the ground in Winnipeg, we delayed the launch of the project, including this webinar, I think about 6 or 7 months due to that situation. And I think for folks I'm also located in Winnipeg, just so everyone knows, on beautiful Treaty 1 territory. And we had a very busy summer, because I think if folks don't understand, so Winnipeg's the only big city center in Manitoba. So if you're being evacuated, you're coming down to Winnipeg. And many of the folks who were impacted were in remote regions of Manitoba. And so, it required an absolutely phenomenal effort on the part of all of the different jurisdictions and different volunteers and nonprofit organizations that were working with folks impacted by that event this summer. So while it was quite timely, as an example, obviously we don't want to impact people during a climate emergency. So we delayed the project. So that was phase one. We've done a lot of planning and communications thus far, and now we're wrapping up that planning phase. In January 2026, we will be working in partnership with Eviance and other organizations located in Winnipeg to conduct our first case study. And then throughout the case research data collection phase, we will also be working with Breton Abilities in Sydney, Nova Scotia. And we still haven't chosen our third case study yet. So if anyone has any ideas, we're happy to hear them. We want to think about regional distribution as well as, maybe a certain area that is affected by different types of climate events. So yeah, happy to hear ideas there. And then in January to March of 2028, we will be doing our analysis and knowledge dissemination phase. So, the reporting. But we do plan to hold additional events such as this, to share case study findings, as well as any other suggestions from the community where we might be able to share more information about the project and about the recommendations that we will come to at the later stages of the project. So that's timeline and next steps. In terms of how you can get involved, you can visit our project website, which will be officially launched in January. You can also just email us directly. I have my email address up there on the screen. And I think one thing that made me think a lot about this project is that I personally did not have an emergency plan. So if you don't have an emergency plan, you may also want to create one. And there's some resources on the slides there that we will share once we get it all translated for you all. And I think that's it in terms of our presentation. I just really want to thank you all for attending today. And thank you for viewing this after the fact. We will post this recording on our website once our website's all finalized. But now I think we have some time if anyone else wants to add any final comments, or if anyone has any questions, we have a little bit of time to speak to that now. Go ahead, Patrick.
I was just we have 3 questions that are in the question and answer, and so I thought I could just read out
Please do.
the first question. So the first question I will read out is, how will the project ensure that the lived experiences of people with disabilities remain central throughout all 3 years? I don't know if Jasmine, you want to
Fantastic.
start with that, and maybe Evan can also talk to that.
Sure, yeah, I can start. So really key to that is, so our project team includes folks with disabilities. So I think that's one component. Another really key component is just making sure that the partners that we're engaging with are people with lived experiences. And so that's diverse individuals with disabilities. And so we have 4 key partners, including Eviance, who represent or who are advocates and researchers and advocacy organizations for the disability communities that we're going to be meeting with. And I would really say that's the key. That's the central piece for us. Evan, I don't know if there's anything you would like to add.
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, Jasmine, that we really wanted to do a meaningful engagement with the diverse disability community, right? And so that meant, again, we're still early on in the project, but that meant like involving OPDs, organizations for persons with disabilities, from the outset. So like in the recruitment process, but throughout the process, people with disabilities will be involved in a sort of participatory way, right? And so to really emphasize that there is expertise, there's knowledge, and there's experience, especially because people with disabilities, not especially, it's ethically the right thing to do, of course. But there is a component of people with disabilities being flexible or having to be flexible in their own lives due to an inaccessible society, right? They're sometimes that's an overgeneralization, but there's so often that people have to be spontaneous in if their sidewalk hasn't been plowed or the bus doesn't come, and there's things that people with disabilities can do offer around their own lived experiences and their own systematic knowledge. And so really not just like involving, but really meaningfully engaging, not just at the beginning or at the end where we sort of have done the work and then, in the dissemination process. It is throughout the project, throughout the 3 years, right? And so they'll just add that's that's one of the major components of our work.
And maybe as a similar-ish question, what opportunities will community members with disabilities have to participate beyond today's webinar, especially those in smaller and remote regions?
Yeah, that's a really great question as well. We're going to have to do some outreach with the community to find out how best to engage folks. So that's the thing is we don't have all the answers. We have some ideas, so for example, sort of meeting people's accessibility needs as both through, virtual meetings, but it might be appropriate in some cases to have in-person meetings, providing accommodations as they're requested. Um, but primarily, we'll be doing focus groups and interviews, and there may be some other alternative formats that we can come up with to ensure that we have that meaningful inclusion. And Evan, I'm not sure if you folks want to add anything to that.
No, I don't think so. That's
I
well
could
put
just
around.
add in
Yeah.
one thing. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
we are taking a case study approach, so we will be focusing on those specific communities in terms of, the in-depth, the detailed discussions with people with lived experience. But we also do plan to, as much as possible, make sure that we're sharing the findings of the research throughout the project. And so we will definitely keep anybody and everybody informed who would like to learn more about the findings of the research as the project progresses. So that's a definite, if you're not in one of those case study communities, obviously, we would like to definitely keep you abreast of the research findings. And
absolutely. Yeah.
then another question, which maybe the Red Cross or Red Cross or Eviance might be wanting to respond to, but what immediate gaps have been observed in current emergency planning that disproportionately affect people with disabilities, especially in climate-related events? So I can just start actually on this. This is an exact question that we want to address through this research. So I don't want to kind of pretend that we have an answer to this question because this is the exact kind of question that we do want to address through this research. So that's an exact great question that would be a focus of our research. But I would pass it on to if the Red Cross would like to respond to that at all, or Evan or anybody else.
And thank you, Patrick, for raising that because that was what I was going to point to as well is, we in our department anyway, within the Red Cross, we focus on emergency response. So once folks are evacuated, what are the challenges there and how do we meet them? And I think Ali's done a beautiful job of covering, some of what we have observed and what, we're doing to address those needs. I think it'll be really interesting through this project, certainly as we have government partners that are part of the advisory committee as well. When you're talking about large scale emergency planning, this falls to government jurisdiction. And I think we'll be able to really gain good insights through their participation in this project, in this case study, and the other two. So, can we circle back to you on that question in about 2.5 years, if that's okay?
Yeah, definitely. Evan,
Great.
did you
So,
have
Yeah.
anything? Sorry, go ahead.
Maybe I'll just quickly add that in our literature review and some of the research we've been doing, we found like a few gaps that have disproportionately impacted people with disabilities, especially not only in like the emergency event, but also sometimes emergency preparedness is planned as like a one-off, right? So like climate disasters as like a single event. And we problematize that idea of like having like a cyclical sort of interrelated conception of what a climate change, what a climate event is, right? It's ongoing and it's repetitive, and we know it's getting worse, right? And so that's always changing, and the needs of people with disabilities are also always changing too, right? Some of that is unpredictable, but it needs to be at a systematic level. We need to make sure that during the recovery phase of preparedness and planning, that if the people need to relocate to homes, that they're accessible homes, right? Or they have access to food, or maybe their specific dietary needs aren't met quite as easily during the recovery phase if it's someone with a disability, right? So things like this, right, that are sort of unique to diversely located people, are so often overlooked when we talk about planning. I mean, that's again a generalization, and we try our best, I think, to do our best. But I think when it comes down to some of those small things, those individual needs, they're overlooked in planning for people with disabilities.
Thanks
Great.
so much, Evan. Does anybody else have any questions that they wanted to ask at this point? We've just got a few more minutes, but you can put your question in the chat.
Great. Okay. We do have a couple minutes left if anyone wants to put, I think, can you put your hand up? Probably easiest just to put it in the Q&A. That might be it. Okay. Any final words from our panelists today? Pressure? Great. Okay. Well, I really want to thank everyone for attending today. Again, this is really just the first step, our project launch. And so you'll certainly be hearing more from us in the new year. We'll be leveraging our networks collectively to, invite people to participate. Again, we'll be starting in Winnipeg, but we are definitely looking for information from, interested organizations and people. So please feel free to reach out. And I just will mention that we will also share the translated slides in the new year. And the recording, we'll share a link next week so folks can view the recording, and also you can share the recording, which will have all the same accessibility features. But again, I would like to thank you all very much for participating today, and I hope that you learned something, and I hope you're as excited as we are about this project. Thank you very much.